And I think I'm going back to being on revenue, although we are free flying tonight on the budget, or this morning. So one, I just want to address something that's been said quite a few times, just to clarify. That 100 million opioid tax, with all due respect, was passed by the majority when they were Republicans last year. So it's not actually us, it was them, and now it's all of us. And no, the only way to get money for substance abuse is not whether you pass legalization of marijuana, but I wanted to highlight that in our one House bill, we had hoped to have money for many things that we don't have. But had we been able to create a regulation and tax system for cannabis products, the commitment, at least in the legislation that I've been carrying for quite a few years now, would in fact commit a significant percentage of revenue from a tax and regulate system to provide both substance abuse treatment and education to discourage people from using drugs. And my colleague also referenced, so we have to get people to smoke marijuana in order to get money for drug treatment. With all due respect, they're already smoking marijuana. The question is, will we ever legalize, tax, regulate, and ensure that we have a system in place that actually raises revenue rather than costs us money and creates a safer, non-criminal environment for the New Yorkers who are already smoking cannabis in quantities pretty equivalent to states that have already legalized. So we have a reality, we're just not confronting that reality. I did want to highlight, though, how proud I am of this bill for all the things that aren't in it. So it doesn't have adequate funding for education. I have to agree with several of my colleagues from across the aisle. We shouldn't have punted campaign finance to a commission. We should do it ourselves. I appreciated the comments about, look what happened when there was a pay commission. Well, that wasn't my idea either. That was the Republicans in the majority. I would have just given us a raise. I think that would have been the right answer. So I also am quite concerned about a commission when we just should have done a public financing system. But as you've heard so eloquently from so many of my colleagues tonight, what we're doing for criminal justice reform is going to have enormous positive ramifications throughout our communities. And despite the fact that there are some DAs saying this isn't well thought out, the truth is, on discovery and speedy trial, most states are already here. They've already been doing this for years, so I don't know what's so shocking about it. And on bail reform, we have also been talking about it for years and years and years. And I know when I go home, even though my district isn't disproportionately made up of people who end up not being able to afford bail if they need it, that it will be one of the first questions I am asked by people. Did you get criminal justice reform done? And I'll be able to say, yes, we did. And they'll say, good job, Liz. Then we have the MTA and the mobility tax or congestion pricing or whatever people want to describe it as. And there, I also think where we have come and where we've gotten to tonight is the right answer, because the entire future of the MTA region and much of the state is dependent on making sure we have a functioning, funded 21st century public transportation system. And here's the issue that I think people are misunderstanding when they talk about where's the equity. We're not asking the state to pay for it. The New York City is basically paying for it, and the New York City region of small numbers of commuters who do drive into New York City. The irony is, it's New York City who will be paying for the MTA capital plan through congestion pricing. And we will be sharing that system with a universe much larger than ourselves. So when we look at, when we look at the plan for congestion pricing and we look at who's going to pay, it is the city of New York who's going to pay. And when we look at two of the tax increases people seem so concerned about, which are the transfer tax increase and the mansion tax increase, that will be wealthier people in the city of New York paying for the MTA. It's not anybody outside the city of New York. It's not the state of New York. It's the city of New York's people contributing through a more progressive tax system money towards MTA. And when you talk about the growth, the increase of $1 billion in taxes, again, please remember, it's mostly coming from the people of the city of New York. Because when we talk about continuing the higher personal income tax rates with a 5-year extension, the largest increase, which is just a continuation of what we've already had, there was a chart going around about who actually pays that. It's the people of my district, personally. I am very comfortable with the fact that representing the wealthiest district in the state of New York, we're supposed to pay our fair share, and that means progressive taxation. And they've been doing it for 5 years, and nobody's left because of it. I have more millionaires now than I did 5 years ago. Nobody's going to sell their apartments and leave because we're continuing that tax to make sure that the people of New York State have more revenue for everyone. So we are a donor to the rest of the state through this tax. We are protecting AIM for our localities. I think there was a great deal of confusion about that. The internet tax is not an unfair tax, it's a fairness tax, and it will mean money going to our localities and our towns and villages. And no, it won't be going to the MTA, just the city of New York's share of the internet taxes will be going to the MTA. So yet again, when you talk about parity, we're trying to save ourselves with revenue that's coming straight out of the city of New York. And so even though we haven't been able to do everything we wanted to this year, Mr. President, and even though there are people saying you're raising taxes by $1 billion, pretty much all of that is coming from higher income people in the city of New York, very often the people in my district, and they aren't going to leave New York because they love New York. They want it to be successful. They know they need a functioning MTA system. We all know, if you come from the 12, 13 counties of lower New York State, we all know that we need to make the investments in MTA, and we've held them to a much stricter standard of accountability in the new plan. Several of my colleagues today talked about the importance of the forensic tracking and accounting and auditing, and we are doing that, and we are doing much cleaner transparency and far more details. And I'm not going to tell you I feel confident it's all going to work out, but I feel more confident that we have a plan that can help us ensure that we have subways and buses and trains that we need to have in order to keep our economy thriving, because it matters in my city and my region, but it actually matters just as much for upstate New York. So I'm proud to be voting yes, Mr. President. Thank you very much.